Another objection is, but Leo, isn't all of this very idealistic and utopian? Actually, it's not utopian. It's just advanced. It's visionary. It's forward thinking. It's not just about the next election cycle. So if all you care about is just winning the next election cycle, then yeah, everything I say here is irrelevant. It's not going to happen within the next 5 years. But also don't forget that society does change rather quickly, and you can't stop it from evolving and changing. So the things that I'm talking about will happen in the next 10, 50 to 100 years. That's our time horizon here. On the one hand, it's very long compared to conventional political wisdom. On the other hand, 100 years is nothing. Society is going to be so radically different in the next 100 years, you're going to be hardly be able to recognize it. Historically, government evolves through intellectual advancements, and that's what we're doing here. First, we have to figure out what the right theoretical foundation is for government. Our culture desperately needs to go meta to be able to look at its own filters. So yeah, right now, conscious politics can seem far-fetched. But we need a vision for the future. We need to understand our root problems and the root solutions, which is what this whole multi-part series is trying to get you to see. Because most people right now do not understand the root problems or the root solutions, or really what government is even about. And also remember that conscious politics is not an all or nothing affair. It's not that either we implement everything I say here tomorrow, or I failed and it's all pointless and hopeless. It's always an incremental process. Consciousness comes in many degrees. There are many stages of development for individuals and for societies. So all that we're talking about here is making incremental 5% improvements in raising our consciousness and level of development. We don't need to worry about perfection. We don't need to worry about being perfectly loving and having a perfectly just society. This is actually a very big problem that many unconscious people fall into, is they say, oh, Leo, society is just so screwed up. It's so corrupt. It's so bad that it's just hopeless. And therefore, I'm not even going to vote. I'm not even going to study this stuff. It's just pointless. This is the worst possible attitude that you can have. This is sort of the problem of perfectionism. Society actually is pretty great these days. If you live in a first world developed country, society for the most part is pretty great. We just need to keep making incremental improvements, and you'll be amazed at how quickly we make progress. We've already made enormous progress in America, for example, in the last 30 years. You might think that, oh, what progress, Leo? It seems like we're regressing backwards with Trump, and it seems like everything's going to hell, and it seems like we haven't made any progress at all. But actually, we're always making progress. We've made enormous progress with gay rights. There's been enormous progress with race inequality. Of course, there's still problems, but there's a lot better than it was 30 years ago. Even with policing, all the problems with policing that exist today, it's still way better than it was 30 years ago, you have to admit. So things are always improving. And don't forget, improvement is not a consistent, linear, upward trajectory. It always ebbs and flows with ups and downs. So never get discouraged by losing one election to some devil. Yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to keep happening. Devils will get elected once in a while. Stuff will regress once in a while. But in the grand scheme of things, we're moving upwards. And in fact, those regressions are necessary. The whole function of Trump is to highlight the unsustainable nature of that type of governance. It doesn't work. What Trump is doing is unsustainable. It doesn't work. And the more he does it, the more obvious it becomes for our culture that it doesn't work. And that's exactly how progress has always happened. For example, with slavery, the reason that slavery was ultimately abolished was because the evils of it became so apparent to people that they could no longer ignore it or deny it. To the point where people just said, okay, enough is enough. It has to stop. And then there was a war. And, during that war, things looked very bleak. The Civil War was, killed like over 1 million people, I think. in that war were killed. And that seemed like a very negative kind of step backwards. But ultimately, it led to the next generation being a step forwards. And that's exactly how progress works. Of course, it works this way collectively, but it also works this way in your own personal life. You notice that your life isn't just a straight linear trajectory upwards towards enlightenment. If only it was that easy. There's backsliding, there's regressions, there's times where you pig out on a gallon of ice cream, or you go back and get addicted to porn again or whatever. But all of those are necessary for you to learn your lessons. The way that human beings learn lessons is by screwing up and making mistakes. So the mistakes are not really mistakes. They're all part of the growing process towards higher consciousness and love. Those mistakes then lead to better infrastructure. So all the mistakes that our ancestors made for thousands of years are baked into the wisdom of our government. Never forget how many millions of people, tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of people died in order for us to learn the lessons and to create the various kinds of governmental institutions that we now have today that prevent those same mistakes from happening. You know, you might say, well, Leo, what was the point of the Holocaust? It was just pure evil. No, it wasn't pure evil. The point of the Holocaust was to show the world what that looks like, what pure selfishness looks like, and how self-defeating it is. See? So that then it doesn't happen again. That's a very valuable lesson that people had to pay with their lives for. Appreciate that lesson. And that's just one lesson out of thousands of lessons that were learned by our ancestors. You can improve your politics significantly right now by adopting the principles I've outlined above. But be careful not to turn these principles into an ideology. If you do, then you have turned conscious politics into unconscious politics. Remember that conscious politics is about the structure, not the content. So just changing the content of your beliefs and adopting all these principles as a new dogma. Structurally, what you're still doing is you're acting out the dogma. It doesn't matter what kind of dogma you're acting out. As long as you're acting it out and you're clinging to it, it's a dogma, and the problem is the dogma, not the content per se. See, so be very careful about this ideology business. The whole point of conscious politics is that you're able to appreciate structure over content. Also understand that conscious politics is not optional. It's going to happen regardless. So if you say, oh, all this is stupid, I don't care about it, I don't like any of this, I'm going to ignore all this, it's still going to happen. Mankind is still going to evolve. Government is not going away. It's going to get more complex. It's going to keep evolving. More conscious policies will be proposed. Various forms of corruption and oppression will be eradicated and expunged. Society will become more equal because that's evolution. So what I suggest is that you align yourself on the right side of history, on the right side of evolution, rather than resisting it or ignoring it or denying it or sweeping it under the rug or saying that it's idealistic and impossible. Remember that if we travel back in time 1,000 years or 2,000 years ago, and we tell them about what society is like in the year 2000, they're going to call you a crazy utopian hippie. And they're going to think it's impossible. And they're going to think it's totally idealistic and impractical. From their point of view, they're right. Because they're so myopic. They don't have a large enough vision and a far enough time horizon. So make sure you don't fall into that same mistake today. Conscious politics cannot happen without you. It all starts with you deepening your own understanding of all these principles and issues and starting to embody them in your own life. There cannot be conscious politics without conscious and emotionally mature people like you. So begin today, begin with yourself. If everything I say in this series would be understood by mankind at large, we would experience a new golden age. And of course, I'm no fool. Nothing I said here will be understood by mankind at large. So there will not be a new golden age, precisely because everything I said here is going to be deeply denied and resisted. That's just the nature of our predicament. That's what ignorance does, is ignorance denies, projects, resists, distracts, creates excuses and rationalizations, attacks, lashes out, and tries to bite the hand that feeds it. Which is why we can't have nice things.